I'm not gonna bother doing an intro. If you're here, then you've probably died a lot to one of the most infuriating bosses in Devil May Cry, Nightmare. The reason why this boss is so irritating is because the method behind your success against this boss forces something different than the others. Up until now, you've probably just been landing your attacks without much extra thought on Phantom, Nilo Angelo, and Griffin. However, Nightmare demands something else with its cores, the source of everyone's frustration. First things first, you need to get Nightmare out of its sludge form, and to do that, you need to hit these wheels with the runes on it. For this, I recommend using Ifrit's Kick 13 with no Devil Trigger. It should just be this horizontal kick that Dante does. In fact, I recommend you use Ifrit for this entire fight. Specifically, you'll need Kick 13 and Rolling Blaze. Kick 13, I just explained why you'll need it to get those runes to appear as quickly as possible, but I'll explain Rolling Blaze later. These two moves are crucial for the strategy that will take place. Anyways, Nightmare has two locations for where its cores can emerge, on top and behind its solid form. There are two very important things that you need to know though. First, these cores can and will break if enough hits are landed. Second, when you damage core, it does not reset in the next fight. It stays there on one condition, but I'll talk about what that condition is in a little bit. The amount of hits you've done is also color coded. Blue means it's a full core, which means that you're safe. You don't have to worry about anything. Green is a half destroyed core, meaning that you have to start worrying about how many hits you're outputting. And finally, the ever accursed and dreaded red core. This means you've done way too many hits and now have to pay the price with an extremely durable core where you're doing paper thin damage to Nightmare's health bar. You do not want this under any circumstance. This is where a lot of blind players get stuck. They lack this knowledge about the state of the cores or their functionality, and it can pretty much soft lock people out of the game because they've gotten all red cores and cannot deal good damage while they keep taking damage themselves, which adds up on lower difficulties or can be a death sentence on Dante Must Die. I would know because it literally happened to me as well on my first playthrough. So if you're playing this game for the first time and you're pretty pissed about this boss fight, trust me, you're not alone, and nobody blames you for something that you were never really prepared for. That is why I'm here, to hopefully get blind players out of this pitfall. So this begs the question, how do you deal with this boss in a successful manner? Well, your goal is to deal as few hits to the cores as possible while still dishing out good damage to the overall health bar. There's some things that you need to know about the relationship between the amount of hits and the core's durability and how you can extend the time for when the cores break. That relationship is, if Dante's hits are plentiful, then the speed of when the cores break will increase. I've been specifying hits because how long Nightmare's cores will last before they break is determined by the amount of hits you're doing and not damage. Alistair is a good example. Alistair combos have a good amount of hits to them, so they will break the cores at a faster rate. Now on the flip side, if Dante's hits are a low amount, then the speed of the cores breaking will decrease. What I mean by this is that if you're hitting the cores a lot lesser amount of times while still doing good damage to Nightmare's health bar, then you can delay the inevitable of the cores breaking for a much longer period of time. Additionally, in Nightmare's sludge form, he may try to consume Dante and send him into this pocket dimension where he has to fight one of the bosses from before again. Once you defeat them and exit, you'll get not just a nice amount of damage to Nightmare's health bar, but the number of hits on the cores before they break will reset too, which is what I was referring to earlier. I recommend only going into Nightmare for these other bosses when you've landed a good number of hits and are starting to feel like the cores are about to break, since a hit counter reset is very important in preventing a case where you have all red cores by Nightmare's third fight. Your main source of damage is going to be if it's charge, punch, and kick combo with Devil Trigger stacked on top. If you run out of Devil Trigger, you can shoot at Nightmare in its sludge form and use Grenade Gun rolling for the best results. You still gain Devil Trigger when shooting at it in its form, so just keep firing away, and once your DT is full, you can activate the runes again. Back to Ifrit though, you don't want to charge for too little or too much, otherwise you won't get as much damage as you should be doing. Right in the middle of that spectrum between too little and too much is the best to get the most optimal damage on Nightmare's health bar possible. This is Ifrit's Just Charge mechanic, where there's a specific part of the charge attacks that will deal more damage. It's really hard to explain, it's kind of something that's felt. What helps me is when I see Dante's arms or feet beginning to catch fire, that's when I release the button, but you'll know you're doing more damage. Now that we have the most important part of the fight out of the way, we can talk about the attacks. The first attacks I want to talk about are the ones that allow you to stun Nightmare by parrying it. These being this rather long-range stab attack and this spinny object thing. I don't know what this is. You can parry both attacks with Rolling Blaze. The spinny thing only happens when Nightmare's top core is revealed, but sometimes there is no spinny attack, so you need to keep your guard up. When this spinning attack does appear, it has some startup before it starts spinning around the arena, so you want to jump on top of Nightmare with Rolling Blaze to stop it before it starts that spinning around. This is editing Nowzeta here. The spinning attack will eventually become invulnerable because in my experience when I was recording this fight on Dante Must Die specifically, I noticed that when I went in to try and parry it, and like even though it like stays there for a little bit, there's like a period where like you just cannot like parry it at all. I think it's like invulnerable. Like I would try to like use Rolling Blaze to parry it and then nothing would happen, and then it would immediately start its attack right after that. So just keep that in mind. It does become invulnerable after a period of time, so you have to be, you know, quicker about parrying the attack. If it does go around the battleground, then you can still stop it with Rolling Blaze. It's just a bit harder to time. I talked about this one first since it's the easier of the two, to be honest. The harder one is the long range stab. This attack comes out pretty fast and it's easy to get caught off guard and take damage. If you do take damage, you can immediately jump to parry, but that probably isn't ideal. Ideally, you'd want to distance yourself just enough to where the attack is more reactable, and you can also parry it when you jump at the right time with Rolling Blaze. When you successfully time your jump to parry the stab, then Nightmare is stunned like with the other attack and you can deal damage. This is editing Nowzeta here, and something that you should know about the stab attack where Nightmare tries to shish kebab you is that you should do a short jump and not a full jump. Now what I mean by that is, if you don't know, if you just simply tap the jump button, then you'll do a short little hop, but if you hold the jump button, then you'll do this full hop. That's Dante's maximum jump height. And throughout the game, you've probably been using the full hop a lot to, you know, get around or just make jumps around the game and whatnot. But like for this specific attack, you would want to do a short jump since you'll be lower to the ground. That means that you're not going to be as susceptible to getting hit again compared to a full jump, where if you land from a full jump, then you're going to have barely any time to react to the attack, and you might also just get hit in general, so that's why a short hop is better. For both attacks, there is also a quiet but noticeable little sound effect for when the stab is parried. You can use it as an audio cue to go in for the damage. Next are these little fishy things. They'll try chasing you down and latch onto you, but again, Rolling Blaze can make quick work of them whether they're on you or not. Next, sometimes when Nightmare opens up its core in the back, it'll send out these black and white orbs everywhere, and sometimes they might even hit the core itself. You may be tempted to just rush in for the damage, but these guys' damage to you can add up pretty quick, and the core stays there for a while longer after they're all gone. In my experience, jumping back and forth with Rolling Blaze seemed to work pretty well. I hope you're seeing why I said Rolling Blaze is pretty important in the beginning. These attacks are why. A lot of trouble is saved from just jumping with this ability. Moving on, there's also these spheres besides Nightmare that can send out these tiny white darts. You really don't have to worry about them. They won't catch up to you with either a simple walk or jumping around. Lastly, there's also another attack Nightmare might do when its top core is exposed, and it's this very deadly laser. There's an audio cue for this attack when it's building up and once it releases, and this attack is sprayed all over the arena, so you probably should not stay grounded. The best way to avoid this attack is to jump on Nightmare and attack the core while it's going on this rampage. You won't get knocked off, so don't worry. Quick note from editing Nowzeta here, Nightmare's beam attack does not cover the entire arena. It's one specific portion, and it also seems to be RNG whether it moves around with the beam or not, because when I recorded the fights on Dante Must Die, it just never happened. It would just shoot in one direction. But then when I live streamed it like a good couple of months ago, maybe even a year ago by this point, I don't know how long ago it is now, but when I live streamed it, it did like move its head around. So it might just be chance. I don't really know if there's some things that you have to do to get it to do that, but maybe it's RNG. I don't know. It's weird. The last thing to talk about in this video is the slight changes with Nightmare's third fight. First, if the wheels aren't active for some time, Nightmare will hang on the ceiling. You just need to activate the wheels to get him down again, but he also might send out projectiles to attack Dante. If this happens, you want to react and use Rolling Blaze to get rid of them. Later on into the fight, and around when Nightmare's health turns red, and maybe has like 25% health left, Trish will backstab Dante and start attacking you alongside Nightmare. This honestly isn't too bad. The attack is telegraphed and it's not spammed to oblivion either. What's worse though is what comes next. As a little homage to Kingdom Hearts, I'll call this Nightmare's desperation move that involves it only having one available red core upon reaching another health benchmark. You cannot avoid this red core at all, and you may want to rush in and finally put an end to this boss, and you could on lower difficulties, but that only guarantees death on Dante Must Die. For those on Dante Must Die, when Nightmare does this desperation move, back away immediately. Be patient and play it safe. Nightmare will send out this fish thing again and the orb attacks from before, but just jump like you've been doing before. As for dealing damage to the core, I've seen people use Ebony and Ivory to build up DT and then continue shooting with Devil Trigger active once enough runes have been filled up, but I personally use Grenade Gun Rolling to build up the DT runes. Regardless of whichever gun you choose, the point is that you should use that gun first without Devil Trigger to build up the runes, and once you have an adequate amount, you can use Devil Trigger while still shooting at the core for better damage. I'm back again. The editing me is back. For Nightmare's desperation move, it will send out lasers from the core, and you want to still do the Grenade Gun Rolling to build it up. And once you do, it will start stealing your Devil Trigger, which really isn't much of an issue. You can still strike, and this is when you can, hit it a bit more freely. Also, it has another attack with those lasers where it will send out like multiple lasers and then like spin them around. You want to be careful of that. It's kind of hard to see since the lasers are like white, and it's like when Nightmare is on that desperation move, it's pretty bright in the arena, so it probably is going to be tricky to spot. But I don't know, just like if you do catch it, try and like jump away. A simple jump should be good. So yeah, if you did this all correctly, then Nightmare should finally go down. Hopefully this guide helps those struggling with this boss. If you're on Nightmare 3 and have all red cores, or you're on Nightmare 2 and have some red cores, yeah, I recommend restarting at that point, unfortunately. While it is hypothetically possible to beat Nightmare under those conditions, it's just excruciatingly tough when your damage output is so poor while you get chipped away at just for human error. This boss really isn't as horrible once you understand its mechanics, but those mechanics are really not hinted at and can only be learned through trial and error if you decide to not search up a guide. While I personally really enjoyed DMC1, this is probably one of its low points for me. I'm aware that this is part of the era's arcade-like game design when you try it over and over again, but things eventually just stop being fun when you're repeating something countless times while trying different things and they just don't work. There comes a point where the enjoyment stops and you just have to quit at it for a while and come back with a fresh mind. But that is all from me. I'll see you all in the next video. Peace out.